30 minutes after my divorce was finalized, I took my 4 daughters and boarded a flight to Seattle. Back home, my ex-husband was taking care of his mistress's son. Our housekeeper uttered a single sentence that would leave my ex-husband's entire family in dead silence. 30 minutes after receiving the divorce decree, I brought my 4 girls to the airport. My ex-husband stood outside the courthouse doors coldly, telling me that besides the monthly child support, I should not expect another dime from his family. But he had no idea. That very night, as he hosted a lavish party to welcome his mistress and his supposed male heir, a single sentence from our housekeeper would turn a massive backyard celebration into an absolute disgrace. The morning sun shone softly over Grand Rapids, Michigan. My name is Diana, and I am 42 years old. My ex-husband, Aaron, is 3 years older. We built a life together for 16 years, raised 4 daughters, and grew a custom furniture manufacturing company that I thought would keep our family secure forever. As I walked down the courthouse steps, I held the divorce papers in my hand. It was a thin stack of paper, yet it felt heavier than my 16 years of being a wife, a daughter-in-law, and a mother. Aaron stood next to his black SUV. His expression was blank, looking as though he had just signed a routine business contract. Behind me stood my 4 daughters. The oldest 15-year-old Riley kept her lips pressed tightly together. Chloe hugged a folder of documents. Sophie stared down at her shoes. And the youngest 6-year-old Mia clutched tightly at my jacket. Aaron cleared his throat. I will transfer the $5,000 in child support right on time every month. Aside from that, do not expect my family to give you anything else. I looked at him. Your family? Aaron paused for a second, then looked away. I mean my parents' assets and the company shares that are still under dispute. Do not use the kids to pressure us. I let out a very quiet laugh. 16 years ago, he once told me that wherever I was, that was his home. Now, at our divorce, the phrase, my family, was used to push the 5 of us out into the cold. I replied to him, telling him not to worry. I told him I would never use my children to beg. I suggested he spend his time raising the son he had chosen and assured him that my 4 daughters would never bother him again. Riley turned her head away. I saw her shoulders shaking, but she stubbornly refused to cry in front of her father. Aaron frowned. Do not speak with such a cynical tone. I already agreed to let the kids go to school out of state and did not fight you for custody. I have compromised a lot. Chloe suddenly lifted her head. Did you not fight for custody because you were compromising for Mom, or because you simply did not want us? The courthouse plaza fell silent. Aaron stared at his daughter. His lips moved, but no sound came out. I placed my hand on my daughter's shoulder and told her it was enough. Our ride was here. A minivan was waiting by the curb. The driver helped us load 5 suitcases into the trunk. Aaron looked at the pile of luggage. Are you leaving today? Yes, tonight's flight, I said. I sent you the itinerary last week. He let out a cynical laugh. Good. When you spend a few months over there and realize life is not a fairy tale, just call. I will not let my kids end up on the streets. I did not answer. Overly confident people often think all roads will eventually lead back to them. Riley walked past her father without saying a word. Aaron called out to her, asking if he had anything to say to him. My daughter stopped. Both of her hands gripped her backpack straps. She told him to remember to transfer the money on time, not because her mother needed it, but because it was his responsibility. Aaron's face flushed red. Is that how you speak to your father? Riley looked straight at him. I still call you Dad, but I have no idea what I am supposed to wish for you anymore. I pulled my daughter into the car. People say words are just wind, but some words cut so deep that no amount of money can ever buy back the trust. The car began to move. Through the window, I saw Aaron. He did not chase after us, nor did he wave goodbye to his children. As the car turned the corner, he was already pulling out his phone. Mia, sitting next to me, whispered to ask if we would ever visit Grandma's house again. She said that for now we would stay near Aunt Diane's place, and if they ever wanted to visit their grandparents, I would take them. My little girl blinked and asked if Grandma would come to Seattle and make them give their toys to baby Brandon. My throat tightened. Sophie chimed in with a quiet voice. She said she did not care about the toys, but when Grandma gave her wooden pencil box to Brandon, Grandma had said that it was useless for girls to keep nice things. Sophie said it made her very sad. I held my daughter's hands. I told them that from now on, no one was allowed to take away their belongings, their rights, or their dignity, just because they were girls. Mia leaned her head on my shoulder and asked if girls could protect a house. I looked at their 4 innocent faces. I told them that girls do not need to protect a house that does not love them. First and foremost, girls need to know how to protect themselves. Riley looked out the window, quietly wiping away her tears. The car drove through the familiar streets of Grand Rapids, passing the turn that led to the family's 3-story estate. A little further down was the Oak Heritage Furniture Manufacturing Plant, the place where I had invested my money, my youth, and my trust. The company sign stood clearly under the sun. The words Oak Heritage were chosen with the hope that our family would have a strong, lasting legacy. In the end, the only legacy I could protect was my decision to leave. My phone buzzed. I thought it was a message from Erin for the kids, but the screen showed the name Martha, the housekeeper who had worked for my husband's family for nearly 10 years. Her message was only 2 lines. It told me to take the kids somewhere safe and that tonight she would reveal something that would make that entire family unable to show their faces ever again. Martha was a very cautious woman. Whatever happened in the house, she usually only dared to whisper about it in the kitchen. She had never used such harsh words. I tried to call her back. The phone rang for a long time, but no one answered. Chloe asked what was wrong. I turned off the screen and said Martha was probably just busy. At nearly 11 in the morning, our car arrived at Detroit Metropolitan Airport. I checked our passports, tickets, school acceptance letters, and the divorce decree one last time. The 5 of us stepped into the domestic departure terminal. Behind us was a 16-year chapter that felt like it had firmly closed. Ahead of us was a new life, and I had no idea how hard it would be. I did not know that at that exact moment on the estate grounds I had just left, my former mother-in-law was ordering caterers to set up a massive reception tent on the lawn. A heavy antique gold family signet ring was placed on the display mantle, waiting to be handed down to Brandon, the boy they firmly believed was the heir to the family. Meanwhile, Martha stood alone in the kitchen, her hands tightly gripping an old yellowed envelope. Inside, it was a secret that could overturn their bloodline, their honor, and their entire family business. The luggage cart stopped in front of the check-in counter. I looked at my 4 girls and told them it was time to go. Riley held Chloe's hand. Sophie put her arm around Mia. I walked right behind them, close enough to know that from today onward, whatever happened, none of them would ever have to walk alone. As the cart disappeared behind the security gates, I suddenly remembered the first suitcase I had dragged through an airport 16 years ago. I was 26 at the time. I had just finished nearly 5 years working for a national furniture distributor in Las Vegas, Nevada, as a regional representative. My life was not glamorous, but it was stable. I rented a small apartment near the transit center. I worked during the day, cooked my own meals at night, and called my parents back in Savannah on the weekends. I met Aaron at a massive furniture trade show in Las Vegas. He was wearing an old suit, standing in a booth so small it was nearly swallowed up by the major brands. Other vendors had glossy catalogs, while he only had a few printed photos of his products and a notebook filled with handwritten specs. I walked past and heard him struggling to speak broken Spanish to a South American distributor, so I stopped to help translate. After the visitor left, Aaron sighed in relief. He said it was a good thing I was there, otherwise the way he was selling his chairs, the customer might have thought he was selling coffins. I laughed. That was the first sentence that made me pay attention to him. Aaron invited me to dinner as a thank you. I thought he would take me to a nice restaurant. Instead, he took me to his cheap motel room and microwaved some boxed mac and cheese. He scratched his head, explaining that he had just arrived and his travel budget was draining fast. He asked me to eat it for now, proudly noting that he mixed in extra cheese slices to make it a premium meal. I felt a mix of amusement and pity. During the meal, Aaron told me his father Arthur had been a woodworker his whole life. Their family workshop used to do well, but in recent years the machinery had aged, customers were leaving, and bank loans were past due. His father in his 60s was still in the workshop from dawn till dusk. Aaron had come to this trade show hoping to land just one solid buyer. I asked if his younger brother helped out. He told me Derek was 7 years younger, sharp, but always looking for a quick buck. Sometimes Derek made a small profit, but other times he caused massive losses. Over the following days, Aaron often sought me out to help translate emails or review business proposals. I helped him refine his presentation, categorize his products, and provide proper documentation on the wood sources. Aaron was a fast learner. Once near midnight, he sent me a draft of his price list, asking me to see if it would scare customers away. I told him the customers might not run, but looking at his formatting, they might need blood pressure medication first. He called me back, laughing out loud, and fixed it immediately. Aaron's sincerity and hard work slowly won my trust. He did not promise me a mansion or a luxury car. He simply told me that if I went with him, he could not promise an easy life right away, but he would take responsibility for our family and never let me carry the burdens alone. At the time, that promise felt warmer than any declaration of love. The company I worked for was considering promoting me to stay on the West Coast longer. But right around then, my mother in Savannah became seriously ill with joint issues, and my father was getting older. I started thinking about moving back closer to family. Aaron proposed to me in a small park with a simple ring and a bouquet of flowers he bought at the station. I accepted because I believed I was not just marrying a husband but finding a partner in life's battles. The day I announced my resignation, an American colleague asked if I had thought this through. She said getting married is one thing, but betting all your career options on your husband's family is another. I was young then, so I just smiled. I believed we were building a life on mutual appreciation. I helped him when he was down, and we would enjoy the fruits of our labor together. Looking back now, I finally understand that you can measure the depth of the ocean, but you can never truly know the depth of a person's heart. But that day, I walked forward with absolute certainty. I flew back to Savannah to ask for my parents' blessing. My father sat in his old rocking chair. After hearing my story, he asked if I truly loved him and if Aaron knew how to respect my career and my money. I nodded, saying Aaron promised that after we married, everything would be a joint decision. My mother did not object, but the night before I moved to Michigan, she packed my clothes and told me that a successful marriage requires compromise to keep the peace, but to never compromise so much that I lose myself. I hugged her, thinking she was just overly worried. Our wedding was simple. We had a backyard barbecue reception with ribs, fried chicken, and potato salad. Ruth, my mother-in-law, held my hand in front of the relatives and told me to consider her like my own mother from now on. After the reception, I moved into the family's sprawling estate in Grand Rapids. Derek greeted us at the front gate, quickly grabbing my suitcase. He joked that our family now had a national business expert and that the company was about to blow up. Arthur asked how my parents were doing and told me that if I ever missed home, I just needed to tell Aaron to drive me back. Only Ruth looked at my heavy suitcase and immediately asked about my savings. She mentioned that since I had worked out of state for years, I must have saved a lot. Aaron frowned and asked his mother why she would bring that up when I had just arrived. Ruth laughed, claiming she was just asking because the money was for both of us, not for her. Arthur quickly changed the subject, telling me to get changed and eat. That afternoon, Aaron took me to see their workshop. The entrance was covered in sawdust and the tin roof was rusting. In one corner, a bucket was catching water from a leak. The table saws sounded terrible, and stacks of unfinished chairs were scattered everywhere. Only about 13 workers remained. The foreman, Bob, mentioned that 4 more guys quit last month because paychecks were late. I opened the inventory books and asked how much the bank loan was. Aaron quietly said it was roughly $250,000, not including the debts for raw materials and back pay. I saw the anxiety on his face. That night we had a simple dinner of meatloaf and mashed potatoes. Ruth gave me a large slice and said that since I was highly educated, had lived across the country, and knew the national market, I should help my husband and in-laws pay off the debt. She added that the house would eventually belong to Aaron and me anyway. Before I could answer, Derek laughed, saying that with me around, Aaron should be scared of us, not the other way around. Arthur tapped his fork against his plate, stating that business matters needed careful calculation and that Derek should not speak carelessly. Under the table, Aaron squeezed my hand. He whispered that I should just trust him, promising that what I sacrificed today would be repaid tenfold in the future. I squeezed back, having no idea that his promise would become the most expensive debt of my life. The next morning, I went to the bank with Aaron. The numbers on the report left me speechless. The workshop's debt was $250,000, but unpaid materials and payroll added another $75,000. I asked Aaron why the total was $325,000 when he said it was less. Aaron looked down, saying he was afraid I would change my mind if I knew the whole truth. I was not angry. At the time, I thought since we were married, hardships should be shared. However, I realized the workshop did not just need a small cash injection, it needed to be rebuilt from the ground up. I brought $75,000 of my own savings from my years working away from home. My parents in Savannah chipped in $200,000 after selling a piece of their commercial property. The total was $275,000. The day I told my father I was using that money to save the workshop, he stayed silent for a long time. He asked if I had secured a safety net for myself. I told him I was entering as an investor with a formal contract, and besides, Aaron was my husband. My mother sighed, saying mutual trust in marriage is good, but money must be clearly accounted for. Even blood siblings need contracts for business. I hugged my mother and promised I would not hand over the money on a verbal promise alone. I would draft a comprehensive equity investment agreement. My father nodded, but his eyes still held worry. I used the funds to pay off the immediate bank loan, the material suppliers, and the back wages. The rest was divided into 3 areas: machinery repair, a new finishing ventilation system, and national distribution licenses. Arthur looked at the 3-page business plan I wrote and said slowly that he had been a woodworker for decades, but when it came to distribution paperwork, he was out of his depth. He told me that from now on I made the calls on that front. Aaron's face lit up, telling me to just let him know what was needed. Only Derek leaned back in his chair, spinning a pen. He said my plan was very detailed, but if we played it too safe, we would never get rich. I looked at him and said, getting rich quick does not mean lasting long. The company was in debt. Survival came first, then we could think about running. Derek smiled, saying he was just afraid we would be walking while everyone else was driving. Arthur sternly replied that walking and reaching the destination is better than sprinting off a cliff. Everyone laughed. Derek laughed too, but his smile was stiff. In the following months, I practically lived at the workshop. I checked raw materials in the mornings, ran the finances in the afternoons, and called national buyers at night. Once during dinner, a client emailed asking about wood moisture standards. I had to drop my fork and run to the computer. Aaron joked, asking if he had married a wife or hired a manager. I replied that I was both, but he better not forget the manager's salary. He laughed loudly, wrapping his arm around my shoulder. saying that if the company survived, I could just become the owner. That sentence made me happy then. I did not know that when the company truly survived, the word owner would become the thing my husband's family hated the most. I completely overhauled the administrative system. Every piece of lumber coming in required a delivery slip proof of payment and a signature. The finishing area got industrial exhaust fans. The old saws were replaced with semi-automatic ones. The workers finally got all their back pay. Bob, the old foreman, received his envelope and said that it was only after I arrived that he believed the shop would not close. I told him the shop survived because he and the men stayed, and that I was just handling the paperwork. Arthur heard this and nodded, saying that knowing how to respect the people below you is how you keep them, and it was a lesson Aaron and Derek needed to learn. Aaron handled regional sales and distributor relations. He was a smooth talker and traveled often, so orders began to rise. Arthur oversaw technical production and scheduling. I managed finances, national accounts, and quality control. Derek was put in charge of sourcing materials. Initially, Derek did well. He knew many suppliers and could get wood at steep discounts. But Derek always loved a quick flip. Once he suggested buying a massive load of lumber from a contact, even though the paperwork was missing. Derek told me to just sign off, saying we would regret missing such a low price. I shook my head, stating that without a clear chain of custody, I would not buy it no matter how cheap. Derek argued that local clients never asked. I told him we were targeting the national market and one mistake could destroy all our credibility. Derek shrugged, calling me rigid because I had lived on the East Coast too long. I smiled and said that rigidity was what kept us from getting shut down. I canceled the transaction. A few weeks later, that exact batch of wood was seized by authorities because it was illegally logged. Arthur praised my caution while Derek stayed silent through dinner. After nearly 2 years, the old workshop transformed into a limited liability company called Oak Heritage Furniture. The name Oak honored Arthur's trade and heritage, was my hope for a lasting family peace. The company now had over 180 employees, 2 factory facilities, and stable orders. In the corporate registry, I held 43% of the shares, Arthur had 24%, and Aaron had 33%. Derek received no shares because he had previously made 2 unauthorized investments that cost the company money. Arthur only gave him the position of head of procurement with a salary and performance bonuses. Derek protested. He told Derek he would reconsider once Derek proved his worth. Ruth immediately defended her youngest son, saying the family wealth would eventually go to the boys anyway, so why was Arthur making the paperwork so complicated? Hearing that hurt my heart, but I stayed quiet. I believed that as long as I did good work, people would eventually see it. The day the company landed its first massive order from out of state, our family hosted a dinner party. Ruth walked from table to table with a bright smile, bragging that it was because Aaron was such a great businessman and Derek was such a great sourcer that the company had grown this big. An aunt asked if it was true that Diana handled the out-of-state clients. Ruth laughed, saying I was just a wife helping her husband, and that it was nothing to brag about. I was carrying a fruit platter and heard every word. Aaron stood nearby, but he just smiled. Later that night, when I went to the kitchen for water, I heard Derek talking to a friend near the fence. He said the company bore his family's name, but the sister-in-law held the majority of the power. He told his friend to just wait, that sooner or later what rightfully belonged to the sons of the house would return to its proper place. I stood behind the door, feeling a chill down my spine on a windless night. 15 years ago, when Riley was born, I truly believed our family had turned a new page. It was a freezing December morning in Michigan. My labor was difficult, and I was kept under observation for nearly 3 hours. When the nurse brought my baby out, Aaron was standing by the door. His eyes were red. He looked down at his tiny daughter and smiled awkwardly, saying she was a girl and looked like me, which was good because she wouldn't need heavy photo editing for her ID later. I laughed, even though my whole body was exhausted. Ruth had been at the hospital since morning. She held her granddaughter and said the first child being a girl was fine just to add some variety to the family, but the second one would definitely be a boy. At that moment, I only saw joy on my mother-in-law's face. My husband loved his daughter. Arthur quietly wiped a tear from behind his glasses, saying any child is a blessing, and the most important thing was that mother and baby were safe. We hosted a small christening party for Riley. Ruth showed off her energetic first granddaughter to everyone. I really thought she loved her. 3 years later, I got pregnant with our second child. Ruth bought me endless supplements, constantly cited old wives' tales, and confidently claimed that based on how high I was carrying the baby, it was definitely a boy. The day of the ultrasound, we found out it was a girl. Ruth stayed completely silent the entire ride home. That night, she set down her dinner plate and sighed, saying, "We would just have to try again for the third one." I told her children are a blessing regardless. She replied that while it's a blessing, this family had 2 sons and no grandsons, and people would start talking. Aaron just told his mother to stop talking like that because I was pregnant. I tried to calm myself, thinking my husband loved me and just didn't want to argue with his mother. Chloe was born during a massive thunderstorm. Aaron was at the hospital, but his phone kept ringing. He held his daughter for less than 10 minutes before rushing off to work. Ruth arrived much later than she had for Riley. She looked at Chloe and said she had fair skin, but that our family was just destined to have too many girls. 3-year-old Riley ran up holding her sister's hand, asking Grandma if her new sister was pretty. Ruth patted her head saying she was pretty, but eventually, both of them would just follow their husbands. I turned my head away, pretending to adjust my baby's blanket. From then on, the snide remarks became more frequent. At every family gathering, relatives would ask when we were having a boy. Ruth would usually answer that her daughter-in-law was great at business, just not great at giving them a grandson. People would laugh, and I had to laugh along so the atmosphere wouldn't get awkward. 3 years later, I got pregnant with Sophie. I was no longer excited to share the news. I was terrified of my mother-in-law's disappointed glare and the thinly veiled questions. The day the doctor told us it was a girl, I sat silently in the car. Aaron drove for a while, then told me not to be sad and that he did not blame me. I turned to him and asked why he would blame me since I did not control the baby's gender. He gripped the steering wheel and said he just wanted me to relax. They sounded like words of comfort, but underneath there was an implied accusation. Sophie was born during a summer heat wave. Ruth did not come to the hospital. She had Martha deliver a generic bouquet of flowers and sent word that her back was hurting. Martha set the soup down, telling me to eat and recover, and that boy or girl, it was still our child. I smiled and told her I knew, but when Martha turned away, I cried. Arthur visited that afternoon. He told me to just be patient if his wife said anything, as she was old and traditional. I asked him if my constant patience would ever make her realize her words hurt me. He stayed quiet, then just said the most important thing was a peaceful marriage. I listened to him that day, thinking that keeping the peace required compromise. I only realized later that the more you compromise, the more people assume you cannot feel pain. When Sophie was almost 3, I got pregnant for the 4th time. The doctor advised against it as my health had deteriorated after 3 tough deliveries, but Aaron said he still hoped for a boy. He held my hand and said this would be the last one, and if it was a girl he would never bring it up again. I nodded. I didn't know if I agreed because I wanted another child or because I was still trying to prove I belonged in that family. During the pregnancy, Ruth forced me to eat specific foods she claimed would guarantee a boy. Once she made a huge bowl of green bean stew and stood over me until I finished it. I joked that if I kept eating it I might not get a boy, but I would turn into a green bean. Martha chuckled. Ruth laughed too, but then told me that once I had a boy, my position in the house would finally be secure. That sentence chilled me to the bone. Mia was born on a June afternoon. Aaron arrived nearly 2 hours late. He walked into the room, looked at his daughter, and sat down in a chair. I asked if he wanted to hold her. He looked down and said he was tired. Ruth arrived shortly after. My mother, who had flown in from Savannah, laughed and cried the moment she saw her new granddaughter. Ruth, however, stood at the foot of the bed and remarked that we now had 4 girls who would all leave with their husbands one day, and she didn't know who would eventually run the family business. My mother was stunned, saying a grandchild is a grandchild and she shouldn't speak like that in front of a newborn. Ruth replied she was just speaking facts and that a legacy company like theirs needed a boy to take the reins. I lay in the bed, my body aching, but the pain I felt wasn't from the stitches. Aaron stayed completely silent. That night, my mother brushed my hair and told me that having empathy is good, but I shouldn't let others make a habit of hurting me. Arthur came to see Mia the next morning. He quietly slipped a small silver bracelet into my hand, saying he bought it for her, and telling me not to tell Ruth so she wouldn't complain. I felt a mix of pity and sadness for him. The people who love you but lack the courage to protect you can sometimes leave scars just as deep as those who hurt you directly. After Mia was born, Aaron changed drastically. He rarely ate at home, often slept at the office, and put a new passcode on his phone. When I asked him why he was working so late every night, he loosened his tie and said the company was big. Now he wasn't a government clerk who could clock out at 5. He told me I ran a business and knew how clients were. Aaron glared at me, telling me I handled the finances and to stick to my lane and not to try and control him. That was the first time he spoke to me like a stranger. One night, while Aaron was in the shower, the phone on the nightstand lit up. It was a single message. "Don't you want to see your son's face?" Before I could read the sender's name, Aaron stepped out and snatched the phone. He yelled, asking who gave me permission to look at his phone. I stared at my husband and asked, which son? Aaron gripped his phone, claiming it was just business and not to overthink it. But his evasive eyes told me that inside our house, another door had quietly opened. The next morning, Aaron left the house very early. He said a client wanted to inspect some inventory, but he was wearing a brand new dress shirt I had bought for his birthday. Aaron, who rarely cared about his appearance, fixed his hair in the mirror twice that morning. I asked what kind of client required him to dress up so nicely. He buttoned his cuffs without looking at me, saying it was a major client, and I didn't need to ask. I didn't press further, but the message about the son kept looping in my head. That afternoon at the office, Derek brought a woman into the conference room. She wore a cream-colored dress and carried a gift basket of fruit. The moment she saw me, she smiled. "Diana, right? I've heard so much about you from Derek." Derek laughed, introducing her as Rachel, a lumber broker from out of state who had found a great source of oak at a solid price. Rachel placed a box of specialty tea on the table, saying it was a small gift for my in-laws, but she didn't dare buy anything for me, fearing my tastes were too refined since I had lived in large cities. She spoke with a calculated mix of politeness and humility that made it hard for people to dislike her. I told her there was no need for gifts as long as the business terms were clear. Rachel smiled, saying she liked people who were straightforward. Aaron walked in shortly after. Their eyes met for only a second before both looked away. Had it not been for the text message the night before, I might not have noticed. I opened the files discussing pricing and delivery schedules. Rachel chimed in perfectly on cue. With Arthur, she talked about quality. With Derek, she talked about profit margins. With Aaron, she praised his decisiveness. And to me, Rachel always said, "I'll need your help with the paperwork, Diana. I hear you're incredibly thorough." After the meeting, Ruth came to the office bringing lunch for Arthur. Rachel immediately greeted her, asked about her back pain, and pulled a silk scarf from her bag, saying she saw the color and knew it would look perfect on her. Ruth stroked the scarf and beamed, saying she was such a sweet girl and whoever married her would be very lucky. Derek, who was drinking water, suddenly choked. Rachel looked down and smiled while Aaron turned his face toward the window. At the time, I just thought they had known each other before. I had no idea that behind those smiles was an affair that had started long before Rachel ever set foot in the company. 6 months before our divorce, Derek fell into massive debt after joining a shady real estate venture with a friend. The project hit legal trouble, his funds were frozen, and debt collectors were calling nonstop. Arthur was furious when he found out, and swore he wouldn't give Derek another dime. At that time, Derek and Rachel had been dating in secret for nearly 2 years. Rachel was an orphan who ran a small diner. Ruth disliked her because she thought Rachel wasn't from a good background, and when she heard Rachel frequently changed jobs, she disapproved even more. One evening, Rachel met Derek in the parking lot. I happened to be walking by and heard her say she didn't need a mansion, she just needed him to be honest with his mother. Derek replied that he was drowning in debt, and if they got married now, how would they survive? He said his mother already hated him, and without money he couldn't marry. Rachel's voice cracked, asking what she had been to him all this time. Derek lowered his voice, begging for more time, saying he wasn't backing out. I thought it was just my brother-in-law's relationship drama and decided it wasn't my place to interfere. I only realized later that it was actually Derek who pushed Rachel toward Aaron. He knew his older brother was disappointed that I had just given birth to a 4th daughter, and he knew Aaron loved being flattered. Derek frequently brought Rachel along to supplier meetings and purposely let her sit next to Aaron. Rachel was an excellent listener. When Aaron complained about corporate pressure, she would say that outsiders only saw him as the CEO. But nobody knew he carried the entire family on his back. When Aaron brought up kids, Rachel would sigh, noting how some men have everything in the world except an heir. Those words were like water dripping exactly onto my husband's weakest spot. At first, Aaron only texted her about work. Then it escalated to private dinners and site visits that lasted longer than they should have. Derek knew everything, but pretended to see nothing. Once Derek even told his brother that Aaron had sacrificed his whole life for the company, and if he found someone who truly understood him, it was a blessing. Aaron frowned and asked what he meant. Derek smiled, saying he was just talking about life in general. During that time, Rachel was still seeing Derek. She was angry at her weak boyfriend, yet seduced by Aaron's power and status. The two brothers, one pushing, one pulling. Eventually, Rachel herself didn't even know if she was seeking revenge, looking for security, or just chasing ambition. When Rachel found out she was pregnant, the first person she went to was Derek. She met him on the warehouse stairs and told him. Derek's face went pale. He asked whose it was. Rachel glared at him, asking how he could even ask that. Derek backed away, saying she had been spending a lot of time with Aaron and without a test who really knew. He said he was in deep debt and would never claim the child. Rachel grabbed his arm, saying she wasn't asking him to marry her right now, just to acknowledge the baby. Derek shoved her hand away, telling her they would talk after the baby was born. That sentence killed whatever feelings Rachel had left for him. After that, she went to Aaron. She didn't tell him it was his child outright. She just cried, saying she got pregnant after their nights together and didn't want to ruin his marriage. Aaron started giving her cash for prenatal care, rent, and daily expenses. He hid the transactions from me by mislabeling them as entertainment expenses from his personal account. When Brandon was born, Rachel sent Aaron a photo. The baby had narrow eyes and a sharp nose, bearing a slight resemblance to Aaron's side of the family. Aaron stared at the photo for a long time. He asked if she was sure it was his. Rachel replied that she wasn't asking him to believe it immediately, just asking him not to let the boy grow up without knowing his father. For the next year, Rachel didn't demand any official status. She just sent photos on Brandon's birthday, when he was sick, or when he first said Dada. Every photo was a rope pulling Aaron further and further away from us. Riley, my oldest, was still quite young then. Once she rode with a company driver to drop off some paperwork. She saw Uncle Derek drop Rachel off at a maternity clinic. That night, Riley asked me if Rachel was sick. I was buried in paperwork and absent-mindedly told her it was probably just a routine checkup. I missed a glaring clue right in front of my face. 2 years before our divorce, Derek secretly swabbed Brandon for a DNA test and matched it against his own. The day he got the results, he sat in his car for over an hour. The paper confirmed Brandon was his biological son, but the man didn't run to hug his boy, nor did he apologize to Rachel. He folded the lab report, locked it in his glove compartment, and stared up at the company headquarters. What was on Derek's mind wasn't the love of a father, but a calculated scheme. The test results sat in that glove compartment for 3 days. For those 3 days, Derek acted completely normal. He still smiled at the factory workers. He still called me Diana, and he still sat at the dinner table with his parents and brother. Only every time he saw Aaron holding Mia or heard his mother complain about not having a grandson, his eyes gleamed. A normal man would think about taking responsibility. Derek was different. His first thought was, what can I get out of this child? One night, Derek asked Rachel to meet him at a coffee shop. Before she even sat down, she asked why he called her, warning him not to ask for more time because she was sick of hearing it for 5 years. Derek slid the DNA results across the table. Brandon is mine. Rachel stared at the letters on the page, her lips trembling. She read it over and over, then started crying, asking why he questioned her when she was pregnant. Derek lowered his voice, saying he had nothing back then, but now he had a way for her and their son to enter the family properly. Rachel looked up, asking if he was going to claim Brandon. Derek shook his head. He said if he claimed him, his parents would just give them a small allowance. But if Aaron claimed the boy, Brandon would be the firstborn grandson. His mother herself would open the doors and force Aaron to hand over the family assets to him. Rachel was stunned, asking if he wanted his own son to call another man dad. Derek calmly stirred his coffee. He said it didn't matter what the kid called him. What mattered was who got the inheritance. Rachel looked at the man she once loved like he was a monster, but she didn't get up and leave. 5 years of rejection from Derek had changed her. She wanted Brandon to live a life of luxury. She also wanted Ruth, who had once looked down on her, to be forced to welcome her into the home. And deepest down, she wanted to take my place. Rachel asked if Aaron would believe her based on a few photos. Derek said no, there had to be a DNA test. She asked if they were going to forge the document. Derek said there was no need to forge the document. They just needed to swap the samples. Derek had planned everything before even calling her. At the exact same time, he was building a network of phantom suppliers, 1 shell company under Rachel's cousin's name and 2 LLCs run by his buddies. They had nothing but P.O. boxes, corporate stamps, and bank accounts. Derek told Rachel to act as the broker. Once she got a job at the company, she would verify the suppliers, Derek would submit the purchase orders, and Aaron would sign the checks. Since they each held one piece of the puzzle, nobody would see the full picture. Rachel asked what would happen if I audited the books. Derek said that was exactly why they had to remove me from the finance department first. Their plan wasn't just about sneaking a child into the family. Brandon was the key to unlocking Ruth's trust, and those phantom companies were the siphon to drain the cash. The person they chose to swap the DNA samples was Martha. Martha had worked for our family for nearly a decade. Her son Danny used to be a delivery driver for the company. Once Derek told Danny to deliver lumber to a rented warehouse, then intentionally rerouted him. Afterward, $75,000 worth of oak was reported stolen. Derek kept all the delivery slips signed by Danny. He knew Danny didn't steal it, but he used the paperwork to blackmail Martha and her son. One afternoon, Derek pulled Martha behind the warehouse. He told her Danny lost the shipment and that his father didn't know the details yet. Martha went pale, explaining that Danny delivered it exactly where he was told, but his name was on the manifest. Derek asked her who the police would believe. Martha pleaded, asking what he wanted her to do. Derek placed a home DNA test kit on the table. He told her that tomorrow afternoon, when the kids were napping, she needed to swab the inside of my youngest daughter's mouth. Martha backed away, asking why he needed a child's DNA. Derek told her it was family business and she didn't need to know. He promised he wouldn't harm the 6-year-old girl. Then he pulled out the folder with Danny's name on it. He told her if she refused, she should get ready to visit her son in a federal penitentiary. It was a small favor for her son's freedom. Martha cried all night. The next morning she called Danny but was too scared to tell him the truth. Danny just told her that if they did nothing wrong, they had nothing to fear. But Martha didn't understand the law, nor did she know how legally damning Derek's forged documents were. That afternoon, while Mia was sleeping in her swing in my room, Martha stood at the doorway for a long time. My little girl opened her eyes and smiled, asking if she was looking for Mommy. Martha wiped her tears and said no, she just needed to check Mia's mouth to see if she had a sore. Mia innocently opened her mouth. Martha used the cotton swab, rubbed it gently against my daughter's inner cheek, and turned away. That swab was placed in an envelope with Brandon's name on it. Aaron's sample was a real one Rachel had collected when he visited. Before handing the kit over to Derek, Martha secretly took a photo of the registration code and kept the shipping receipt. She didn't know if she would ever have the courage to speak up, but she felt she had to keep proof that she hadn't done this wicked thing willingly. Derek gave the kit to Rachel and told her to mail it under her name. He warned her not to show the results immediately, but to wait for the perfect moment when Aaron was being pressured by his mother about an heir. Rachel stared at the envelope, saying if they got caught, they would both be ruined. Derek sneered, saying if you want to climb high, you can't be afraid of heights. He told her not to pretend to have a conscience now. 10 days later, the results arrived. Rachel opened it first. The conclusion stated that the probability of paternity was virtually absolute. She knew it was a lie, but she stared at the word father for a long time. Perhaps she had convinced herself she was just securing a better future for her son. That afternoon, Ruth had just publicly mocked Aaron at a family gathering for having a big company but no heir. Aaron went back to the office and drank alone in his suite. Rachel called, asking if he could come over. Aaron paused, then asked what was wrong. She told him she had done the test. An hour later, Aaron showed up. Rachel placed the lab report in front of him. Her voice cracked, saying she didn't want status or to ruin his marriage. But her son couldn't spend his life using another man's name. Aaron held the paper, his hands shaking. Meanwhile, back at our house, Martha sat next to Mia's bed looking at my sleeping daughter with tears streaming down her face. She knew she had just helped plant a time bomb in the middle of my family. Only nobody knew the bomb would detonate on the exact day the 5 of us left the state. The rain started falling heavily that evening. I had just put Mia to sleep when I heard Aaron's car pull into the driveway. He walked into the house. The shoulders of his dress shirt were soaked. In his hand, he held a crumpled white envelope. I saw the tense look on his face and knew the bad feeling that had haunted me for months had finally arrived at my doorstep. Aaron placed the envelope on the table. "We need to talk." I pulled out a chair and sat across from him. "Talk." He pulled out a sheet of paper and pushed it toward me. At the top was Brandon's name and below it was Aaron's. The conclusion confirmed paternity with a probability of 99.9%. I read every single word slowly. Outside, the rain poured. Inside the room, the ticking of the wall clock sounded deafening. I asked, "Whose child is this, Rachel's?" "And your relationship with her," he looked down. "We have a relationship." I thought he would apologize. At the very least, I expected him to look ashamed for betraying me, but Aaron just said I didn't mean for things to end up this way. But the results are here. I have to take responsibility for the boy. I laughed. It was a laugh so dry that even I felt strange hearing it. "You want to take responsibility for your mistress's son. What about your responsibility to your wife and your 4 daughters? Who takes care of them?" Aaron frowned. "Don't call Rachel that." "Then what should I call her? A colleague, a confidant, or the mother of the heir?" Aaron stood up. "I know I was wrong, but he is innocent. He is my only son. I have 4 kids." I said son. That single word was spoken so lightly, but it was enough to push my 4 daughters entirely out of their father's heart. I looked straight at him. Riley, Chloe, Sophie, and Mia. What did they do wrong? Nobody said they did anything wrong. But you're telling me they aren't enough. Aaron fell silent. Right at that moment, my mother-in-law walked out of the kitchen. She was still holding a dish towel. Seeing her expression, I realized she wasn't surprised at all. "You already knew about this?" I asked. Ruth set the towel down. "I've known for a few days. What's done is done. If we just point fingers, now is the child going to disappear?" My throat tightened. "You're speaking as if I should be thanking Aaron for finally confessing." She pulled out a chair and sat down. "As a wife, you need to look at the big picture. This family has a company and a reputation. We cannot go without a grandson. Compromise just this once for the greater good." I answered, "Compromising for what is right protects a family. Compromising for a betrayal only encourages the guilty party to do it again." Ruth's face hardened. "I am not telling you to leave. You are still Aaron's wife. Those girls are still my grandkids. As long as you know your place, this house will remain peaceful. Knowing my place means letting my husband's mistress bring her son into my home. That boy is the flesh and blood of this family. The flesh and blood of this family. That is why you are perfectly willing to let an outsider trample on your own daughter-in-law." She slammed her hand on the table. "Men deal with business outside. It's hard to avoid temptation." I turned to Aaron. "Is that what you think too?" He avoided my eyes. "People say a husband and wife share one heart capable of draining the oceans. But if one of them is drilling holes in the boat, the other can exhaust themselves to death and still never save it." My father-in-law heard the shouting and came out of his room. He looked at the test results and asked Aaron, "How do you plan to resolve this?" "I want to claim Brandon, but I will continue providing for Diana and the girls like normal." Arthur tapped his cane against the floor. "Like normal how? By bringing the mother and child home and forcing your wife and daughters to look at them every day." My mother-in-law immediately chimed in. "Arthur, don't blow this out of proportion. He is your grandson." He turned to his wife. "A grandson is a grandson. But a mistake cannot be justified." I felt a tiny glimmer of hope, but then he lowered his voice. Diana, calm down for now. Give me time to talk some sense into Aaron. You two have been married a long time. Don't destroy it over a moment of anger. I asked, how long do you expect me to wait? He sighed. Just be a little patient with your mother-in-law and your husband. I will find a way. The hope that had just surfaced vanished immediately. He still cared for me, but his affection always stopped at the threshold of a confrontation. Derek appeared last, pretending to be shocked. What's going on? Why is everyone yelling? His mother handed him the paper. Your brother has a son outside the marriage. Derek glanced at it, then looked at me. Diana, I know you're hurt, but the kid is innocent. How about we just let his grandparents officially acknowledge him for now? We can sort out the adult drama later. I stared at him. You're awfully quick to suggest bringing that kid into this house. Derek smiled stiffly. I just want our family to have peace. Aaron has a son, so the company finally has an heir. My 4 nieces will still get their cut. I asked, is this company an asset owned by its shareholders, or is it a prize for whoever happens to be born with male anatomy? No one answered. 3 days later, Brandon was brought to the house for the first time. Rachel wore a conservative blouse, leading the boy by the hand up to the front door. As soon as she saw me, she looked down. I'm sorry, Diana. I didn't want things to turn out this way. I stared at her. You didn't want this, but you still walked through that door. I am just bringing my son to meet his grandparents. My mother-in-law rushed out of the house and hugged Brandon as if she had been waiting for this moment her entire life. Grandma's boy is finally here. She had already bought toy trucks, new clothes, and expensive sneakers. Mia, standing near the stairs, watched her grandmother tie Brandon's shoes and whispered, Mom, did Grandma know him for a long time? I didn't know what to say. From that day on, Rachel brought Brandon over every weekend. Ruth called him the sole heir. Aaron slowly began openly carrying Brandon around the house. Derek always appeared at the right moments to play with the boy while keeping a calculated distance. I started watching Rachel more closely. She wasn't just looking at Aaron. Every time she came to the company, her eyes drifted to the accounting office, the organizational charts, and the stacks of documents on my desk. A month later, Aaron announced in a board meeting, starting next week, Rachel will help manage supplier relations and coordinate directly with Derek. I put my pen down. She has 0 internal management experience. Rachel knows the raw materials market. I have made my decision. Derek smiled. Diana, just let us handle it. Procurement needs someone a bit more flexible right now. Rachel looked at me, her voice still sickeningly sweet. I lack experience, Diana. I hope you'll guide me. Aaron handed Rachel a corporate access badge. She gripped it, a faint smirk crossing her face before it disappeared. That was the moment I realized this woman had never just wanted my husband. She wanted to take my place both in my family and in the company I had built with half my life. Since Rachel got her access badge, she integrated into my life so seamlessly that outsiders probably thought I was the newcomer. At the plant, Rachel sat with Derek, reviewing price quotes, initialing supplier invoices, and walking them over to Aaron for final approval. At home, she brought Brandon over every weekend with lavish gift baskets. Meanwhile, I, who had lived in that house for 16 years, was suddenly required to ask permission just to look at corporate files. That Thanksgiving, Ruth announced the entire family would have a massive dinner together. She declared, This year our family has grown with Brandon. We need to make it a grand celebration. Riley looked down, snapping green beans. Chloe looked at me and stayed quiet. Sophie carried plates into the kitchen. Mia asked, Is baby Brandon sleeping over at Grandma's house tonight? I answered, Probably just for dinner, then he'll go home. That afternoon, the kitchen smelled of roast turkey stuffing and baked potatoes. Martha was preparing cranberry sauce. I was making Arthur's favorite honey-glazed ham. Rachel arrived at 4 o'clock wearing an elegant dark green dress, holding Brandon's hand and carrying 2 bottles of expensive wine. She smiled and said, I came early to help Diana. I looked at her perfectly manicured nails. Just sit in the living room. The oven is hot. If grease splatters, it'll ruin your nice dress. Martha suppressed a smile. Rachel got the hint, set the wine down, and went into the dining room. When it was time to say grace, the entire family gathered around the feast. Ruth pulled Brandon right next to her while my 4 daughters were lined up at the far end of the table. She placed her hand on Brandon's shoulder. Pray sincerely, sweetheart. One day you'll be the one protecting this family's good name. Riley clenched her fists. Aaron looked back. Riley, tell your sisters to scoot down a bit. Make room for Brandon. My daughter asked. We are your kids too. Why do we have to move? Aaron frowned. It's Thanksgiving. Don't start a fight. When grace was over, Ruth sat Brandon next to her at the head of the table. Beside him sat Aaron and Rachel. My 4 daughters were shoved to the opposite end near the kitchen door. I pulled up a chair and sat with them. The turkey was carved. Ruth immediately grabbed a massive drumstick and put it on Brandon's plate. Eat up, sweetheart. Grow big and strong. Mia stared at the drumstick, then looked down. She loved drumsticks. Everyone knew that. I grabbed a soft piece of breast meat and put it on her plate. Eat this, honey. It's just as good. Mia smiled, but it was a very small smile. When it came time for gifts, Ruth handed Brandon a thick envelope of cash. This is from Grandma to bring you luck. Study hard so you can take over your daddy's business. My daughters each received a very thin envelope. Sophie stayed polite. Thank you, Grandma. Her grandmother just gave a quick nod, then turned back to Brandon. Which toy truck do you want to play with? I stayed quiet. I had been quiet for so long I no longer knew where the breaking point was. The breaking point finally arrived when Ruth went into a bedroom and came out holding a custom-engraved wooden pencil box with Sophie's name on it. It was a gift Arthur had specially ordered for my daughter after she won a state spelling bee. Her grandmother handed the box to Brandon. This is for you. Boys need to learn to manage important things. Sophie's face went pale. Grandma, that's my pencil box. You can see my name is carved right there. Ruth waved her off. We are family. What does it hurt to give something to your little brother? Girls shouldn't be so stingy. Sophie looked down, her eyes welling with tears. Riley slammed her fork down on the table. Grandma, we are your real grandchildren. Why do we always have to be the ones who compromise? The entire table went dead silent. Ruth spoke coldly. Is that how a child speaks to an adult? Stand up. I am just asking. Brandon got here last. He's not even Mom's kid, but he gets the best seat, the best food, and the most money. And now you're stealing my sister's stuff for him. Aaron yelled. Riley, apologize to your grandmother right now. My daughter turned to her father. What did I do wrong? Apologize. If I apologize, is Grandma going to stop stealing from us? Aaron stood up. You have zero respect. Get away from the table. Riley bit her lip. Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't sob. She shoved her chair back and walked straight upstairs. Chloe and Sophie immediately followed her. Mia looked at me, confused about whether to stay or run. I set my plate down. Go upstairs and stay with your sisters. Ruth slammed her hand on the table. Diana, how are you raising your children? I stared at her. I am raising them to know the difference between right and wrong. It's called being disrespectful. Taking something from one grandchild to give to another just because he has a boy's anatomy. What do you call that, Ruth? Rachel chimed in. Diana, today is Thanksgiving. Please don't make your mother-in-law sad. I turned to her. This is my family's business. You do not have the right to teach me how to be a daughter-in-law. Rachel flushed red. Arthur tapped his cane on the floor. Enough. Can we not just let the children eat in peace? I didn't answer. I walked upstairs. Inside the bedroom, Riley was hugging her two younger sisters. Sophie had placed her empty pencil box on the bed and was crying. I don't care about the box. I just don't understand why Grandma hates us. I sat down and pulled all of them into my arms. Riley said, Mom, don't stay quiet anymore. I will study really hard and take you and my sisters far away from here. A tiny apartment is fine as long as nobody ever calls us outsiders again. That sentence shattered the very last ounce of hesitation in me. I used to think staying quiet was how you protected a home, but if the price of peace was teaching my daughters to bow their heads, then this house was no longer worth protecting. That night, Chloe brought me 3 photocopied invoices. My daughter pointed to the corners of the pages. Mom, look at these 3 suppliers. The company names are different, but the phone numbers are exactly the same. And all 3 of them misspelled eucalyptus the exact same way. I was shocked. Where did you see this? Yesterday, the lady in accounting asked me to help organize some loose papers. It looked weird to me, so I remembered it. I inspected the papers closely. The email addresses and the formatting of the material specs were nearly identical. I stroked my daughter's hair. You did the right thing bringing this to me, but from now on, let the adults handle it. Don't go digging around anymore. After Chloe went back to her room, I booted up my computer and emailed my former manager in Seattle. Then I copied the entire supplier registry and the corporate shareholder ledger into an encrypted cloud account. There are houses that look grand from the outside, but the people living inside must suppress themselves until they lose their dignity. Did the numbers Chloe found lead me to another secret? Deep in the night, I opened the corporate document safe to look for the operating agreement. Under a stack of contracts, I found a drafted corporate resolution. It stated that I agreed to transfer a portion of my equity directly to Aaron. At the bottom of the page was a signature that looked like mine. I stared at it for a long time, then whispered, "This is not my signature." I didn't sleep at all that night. The forged resolution lay on my desk under the yellow lamplight. It looked like a trap that had already been set. The signature at the bottom tried to mimic my strokes, but the forger didn't know that I always extended the final tail of my last name significantly. I photographed every page, then put everything back exactly as I found it. The next morning, I took the day off work, telling them I was taking Mia to the dentist. In reality, after dropping my daughter at school, I drove straight to Miss Susan's law office in downtown Grand Rapids. Miss Susan was a very calm attorney. After listening to my story, she asked, Do you have the original stock certificates? I have notarized copies. The originals are kept in the company safe. I managed to copy the shareholder registry, the operating agreement, and older resolutions, but I haven't been able to secure the most recent files. Miss Susan tapped her pen on her desk. Emotions can be expressed with tears, but in a courtroom, you speak with paper. Starting today, do not argue with them. Secure the evidence and absolutely do not sign anything without reading it 3 times. Miss Susan looked at the photo of the forged resolution, zoomed in on the signature, and said, "A single piece of paper isn't enough to prove who forged it, but it proves someone is actively preparing to push you out of the company. You cannot let them know you're on to them." She wrote down a checklist of documents I needed to secure proof of my initial capital injection, the wire transfers from my parents in Savannah, the corporate bylaws, the shareholder list, emails with West Coast clients, national distribution, contracts, and a log of every time Aaron restricted my access to the system. I asked, if we divorce, can he take my shares with just a fake signature? No one can take it with a fake signature. Whether the equity is considered separate property or marital property will depend on the source of funds and the corporate structuring. Let the paper trail do the talking for you. I walked out of her office feeling for the first time in months that I wasn't backed into a corner anymore. That afternoon when I arrived at the office, my access card to the internal banking portal had been deactivated. I called our head accountant, Renee. "Renee, why is my access blocked?" Renee sounded hesitant. "Mr. Aaron asked us to temporarily suspend your approval rights. He said the finance department was undergoing restructuring." I marched straight into the CEO's office. Aaron was sitting with Derek and Rachel. On the desk were 3 folders of proposals from the new suppliers. I asked, "You blocked my financial access without a board vote." Aaron leaned back in his chair. "I am just making some temporary operational adjustments. Lately, you've been letting family drama affect your work. I found fraudulent invoices." "Is that what you call being affected by family drama?" Derek chimed in. "Diana, you're just being paranoid. Goods arrive late sometimes. Paperwork gets messed up. It's normal." I glared at him. "Normal or not, let the inventory logs answer that." Rachel lowered her voice. "Diana, I think it's best if we work together. If you stay this tense, the employees will start gossiping." I turned to her. "You've been here a few months. Do not teach me how to operate a company I built with my own money." Aaron slammed his hand on the desk. "Enough. Starting today, I hold the corporate seal and the payment authorization rights. You focus on handing over the national distribution documents." I didn't argue. My silence made the 3 of them think I had surrendered. That night, I received an email from my former manager. The Seattle-based company agreed to offer me a 2-year contract, placing me in their Seattle office, and offered to help with the girls' school enrollment. I called my sister Diane, who lived in Seattle. After hearing the story, she just asked, "Are you sure?" "I'm sure, Diane." "Then get over here. My apartment is cramped, but it's enough for the 5 of you for now. Better to have a cramped house than a cramped heart." I laughed through my tears. "You sound exactly like a Southern girl living in the Pacific Northwest. No matter where we live, having family is what matters. You just handle the paperwork. I'll arrange everything on this end." For the next 2 months, I lived like 2 different people. During the day, I went to the office, handed over files, dropped the kids at school, and cooked dinner as if nothing had happened. At night, I worked on transferring insurance, school registrations, and finding an apartment in Seattle. Riley was the first to know my plan. She asked, "Are you scared?" "Yes." "Then why are we still going?" "Because being brave doesn't mean you aren't scared. Being brave means you're terrified, but you take the step anyway." Chloe was worried about keeping up with Seattle schools. Sophie asked if she could bring her new pencil box. Mia just wanted to know if Seattle had the Space Needle like on TV. I told them not to tell their father's family until everything was finalized. Not because I wanted to deceive them, but because I knew Ruth would use every dirty trick to stop me. A week later, Aaron was the one who initiated the divorce filing. He dropped a stack of papers in front of me. "There's no point in living like this anymore. You take custody of the 4 girls and I will pay child support. We can deal with the house and the company later." I asked, "You don't want custody of even one of them?" Aaron avoided my gaze. "They're used to you. I don't want to separate them." His words sounded so noble. But I knew he just wanted to be completely free to move Rachel and Brandon in. Derek happened to be standing in the hallway pretending to casually walk by. "Diana, settling this amicably is best, right? The kids going to school on the West Coast will have a brighter future anyway." I looked at him. "You really want us gone, don't you?" Derek smiled. "You're overthinking it, Diana. I just want everyone to have peace." I took the papers to Miss Susan. She reviewed every clause, ensuring it clearly stated I had full custody, Aaron would pay $5,000 a month, and he retained visitation rights. My 3 oldest daughters were asked for their preference by the mediator. All 3 chose to live with me. Mia was allowed to join us so she wouldn't be separated from her sisters. Aaron signed the consent forms for the girls to study in Seattle. He even scoffed. Let them try it out. If they can't handle it, they can always fly back. I didn't correct his delusion. His overconfidence became the open door for the 5 of us to leave peacefully. I absolutely refused to sign anything relinquishing my corporate shares. The dispute over the company assets was severed from the divorce to be litigated separately. The day the divorce decree was issued, Aaron truly believed he had successfully purged me from his house, his company, and his life. That night at 10:15 p.m., the plane carrying the 5 of us lifted off the runway at Detroit Metro Airport. At that exact hour, back at the house in Grand Rapids, 7 massive tables of catered food were beautifully set up on the lawn. Ruth placed the antique gold family signet ring on the mantel and announced, "Tonight I am passing this heirloom down to the true heir of the family." I only learned the full details of what happened at my ex-husband's house that night from Martha, Arthur, and a few relatives. As our plane left the tarmac, 7 tables were loaded with barbecue ribs, brisket roasted chicken, and massive bowls of potato salad. Ruth had even hired a crew to string fairy lights from the front gate all the way to the living room, making the house shine as brightly as a wedding venue. The relatives had gathered. Those who knew the truth understood this was Rachel and Brandon's welcome party. Those who didn't only heard from Ruth that the family was celebrating incredibly good news. Aaron wore a crisp white shirt holding Brandon and walking from table to table. The boy had already been coached to call him dad, so every time someone asked, he obediently replied, "I'm Aaron's son." Every time she heard that, Ruth smiled so hard her eyes squinted. She told an uncle, "Our family finally has an heir. It took a while, but the Lord is still watching out for us." Rachel wore a deep red dress, her hair pinned up elegantly, sitting in the exact chair I used to occupy at family functions. She didn't call Arthur and Ruth mom and dad just yet, but her every movement was that of a newly minted lady of the house. An aunt saw Rachel and asked, "When are you two making it official?" Rachel looked down demurely. "I'll leave that to Aaron and his parents to decide. I wouldn't dare demand anything." Ruth immediately defended her. "Rachel is a good woman. She has sacrificed so much. Now it is our family's turn to take responsibility for her." Arthur sat at a table in the back, his face grim. He didn't want this party to happen. But Ruth had warned him that if he didn't show up, the relatives would think the family was rejecting their own grandson. Derek sat next to his mother, occasionally whispering in her ear. From the outside, he just looked like a supportive younger brother helping host the event. Nobody knew that the child Aaron was holding was actually Derek's biological son. As the clock neared 8, Ruth ordered Martha to bring out the wooden display box from the parlor. Martha carried the box with both hands. Her face was pale, and her steps were much slower than usual. Ruth opened the lid. Inside rested a heavy 2-4-carat gold family signet ring on a velvet cushion. My mother-in-law held the ring up in front of the relatives. This was passed down from my father-in-law. I have kept it for years, waiting for the day I could give it to the male heir of this family. Today, in front of everyone, I give this to Brandon. Applause broke out. Aaron set Brandon down next to his grandmother. Rachel wiped her eyes, pretending to be moved to tears. Derek smiled. "Mom, just put it on my nephew. Then he can give his grandparents a proper hug." Martha was still standing next to the table. Her hands were clenched so tightly over the serving tray that her knuckles were entirely white. Just as Ruth reached out to slip the gold ring onto Brandon's finger, Martha suddenly spoke up. "Wait a minute, ma'am." The entire lawn slowly fell silent. Ruth turned her head. "What is it? Tell me later." Martha shook her head. "If I wait and you put that ring on him, it's going to be a lot harder to take off." Derek immediately stood up. "Martha, today is a happy day. Stop talking nonsense." Martha stared right at him. Her lips were shaking, but her voice rang out clear. "Mr. Derek. That boy is not Mr. Aaron's son." The gold ring slipped from Ruth's fingers, clattering loudly against the wooden table. Aaron stepped forward. "Martha, what are you talking about?" Martha turned to him. "That DNA sample with Brandon's name on it was a swab I took from the inside of Mia's mouth. Rachel forced me to do it. And the person who paid me off all this time wasn't just you, Mr. Aaron. It was Mr. Derek." All eyes immediately shot toward Derek. He slammed his hand on the table. "You're framing me." Martha was startled but did not step back. "I didn't say you were the father. I'm only saying what I saw. I saw you hugging that boy behind the warehouse. I saw you handing cash to Rachel and telling her to make sure Mr. Aaron never found out." Rachel burst into tears. "Martha, what did I ever do to you to make you try to destroy us?" Martha snapped at her. "Don't call me Martha like we're friends. You threatened my son's freedom to force me to swab a 6-year-old girl. I have lived in terror every single night." Ruth gripped the back of a chair, her face ash white. "Impossible." The test results were clear. Martha pulled a plastic Ziploc bag out of her apron. Inside was a copy of the lab kit's barcode, the FedEx shipping receipt, and printouts of several text messages. "I kept these because I knew that one day I'd have to speak. The sample was taken at this house with no witnesses. I was the one who rubbed that cotton swab inside Mia's cheek. Aaron snatched the papers from her hand and read them one by one. He stared at Rachel. Is this true? Rachel shook her head violently. No, she's lying. I don't know anything about this, Derek chimed in. Aaron, don't believe her. She lost $75,000 worth of lumber last year. I fired her son over it, so she's holding a grudge. Martha glared at him with lethal intensity. You were the one who changed the delivery address and framed Danny. I have been terrified of you for too long. Today, Diana and her kids are gone. I have no reason to stay quiet anymore. Arthur stood up, his voice trembling with pure rage. Derek, explain. Derek pointed at Martha. Dad, are you going to believe a housekeeper over your own son? Arthur replied. I am asking the person being accused. You are my son, which is exactly why you need to answer me. The relatives began whispering. People who had just offered congratulations were now exchanging nervous glances. No one dared to touch the food. Brandon, terrified by the yelling, hugged Aaron's leg. Daddy, I want to go home. That word made Aaron look down. His expression changed completely. He looked at the boy, then at the papers in his hand. Tomorrow I am taking this boy to do another test. Rachel quickly grabbed her son's arm. Aaron, you don't trust me. Aaron pushed her hand away. This time the sample will be taken at the clinic with verified ID. If you're telling the truth, what are you afraid of? Rachel froze. Ruth clutched her chest and collapsed into her chair. Martha stepped forward to help her, but my mother-in-law slapped her hand away. If you are lying, I will destroy you. Martha's voice choked. I wish to God I was wrong. But the truth doesn't change just because we want it to. Amidst the chaos, Rachel slowly backed away toward the stairs. She whispered that she was going to get her medication. About 10 minutes later, Aaron asked, Where is Rachel? No one answered. The back door near the kitchen was slightly open. Rachel's car was still parked outside the gate, but her purse, phone, and passport were gone. Upstairs, Brandon sat alone next to a small suitcase, confusedly asking, Where did my mommy go? 2 days after the disastrous party, the new test results came back. Aaron picked them up himself. He refused to let Derek or Ruth know the outcome first. The single sheet of paper contained only a few lines, but it was enough to annihilate the delusion he had clung to for nearly a year. Aaron and Brandon shared absolutely zero biological connection. He sat in his car outside the clinic for a very long time. His phone rang incessantly, sometimes his mother, sometimes Derek, sometimes his father. Aaron didn't answer. When he got home, he walked straight upstairs, ripped the framed photo of him holding Brandon off the wall, and smashed it against the floor. The sound of shattering glass made the boy jump and start crying. Daddy. Aaron froze. Brandon ran over and hugged his leg. The boy's face was flushed with fever. The kid didn't understand what a DNA test was. He certainly didn't understand why the adults who had called him the sole heir yesterday were looking at him today like he was a piece of misplaced trash. Ruth rushed upstairs. Aaron, what are the results? He handed the paper to his mother. Before she even finished reading it, her knees buckled and she collapsed on the edge of the bed. Impossible. He called you daddy? All this time. Aaron let out a bitter laugh. Does calling someone daddy magically change their DNA? Mom Ruth looked at Brandon, then looked at the gold signet ring still sitting on the dresser. Then whose son is he? Aaron turned to Derek, who was standing in the doorway. You answer that. Derek tried to keep his voice steady. I told you I've just known Rachel for a long time. Whose kid is he? You need to find her and ask her. She ran away, so file a police report. Don't let a housekeeper's gossip make you suspect your own brother. Aaron lunged forward and grabbed his brother by the collar. Martha said you were secretly giving her cash, hugging the kid behind the warehouse. Derek swatted his brother's hands away. I loved the kid because I thought he was yours. Is it a crime to love? My nephew Arthur marched up the stairs, banging his cane against the steps. Enough, the boy has a fever. Are you two really going to brawl right here, Brandon? Curled up at the edge of the bed. Only then did Martha explain what was happening. The look in the boy's eyes forced Arthur to look away. Aaron reached down and touched Brandon's forehead. He recoiled. The kid was burning up. Where is his medicine? Ruth looked utterly lost. Rachel brought his things in a bag. I don't know which one it is. Martha grabbed a thermometer. It's almost 102 degrees. Aaron picked Brandon up and rushed him to the nearest urgent care. The doctor said the boy had strep throat compounded by a viral infection and extreme stress. He needed a strict medicine schedule, temperature monitoring, and a calm environment. On the ride back, Brandon fell asleep on Aaron's lap, murmuring in his delirium. Daddy, don't leave me. Aaron didn't answer. He just held the boy tighter. Brandon's maternal grandmother had just had eye surgery out of state and couldn't travel. His aunt worked in another city and had to request time off. Both sides agreed it would take 6 days before someone could come pick him up. For those 6 days, Aaron stayed home to take care of Brandon. On the first day, he was so clumsy he spilled half the liquid antibiotics on his shirt. Brandon winced. Mommy usually mixes it with apple juice. Aaron replied, "We don't have apple juice. I'll go buy some." Aaron looked at the boy, grabbed his car keys and left. Martha, watching from the kitchen, just sighed. She had watched Aaron completely ignore all 4 of his daughters when they had fevers, always using client meetings as an excuse. Now he was running all over town trying to find a specific brand of juice for a child who didn't share a drop of his blood. On the second night, Brandon had a severe coughing fit and threw up all over the sheets. Aaron changed the bedding himself, wiped the boy down with a cool cloth, and rocked him back to sleep. The bedroom used to belong to Mia. On the top shelf sat a stuffed bunny we hadn't had time to pack. Brandon hugged the bunny and asked, "When is Mia coming back to play with me?" Aaron went silent. A moment later, Brandon asked again, "Daddy, did you call my sisters?" "They went to Seattle. Why didn't you go with them?" Aaron couldn't answer. That night, he sat on the floor until dawn. On the wall were several pencil marks tracking Mia's height. There was one mark from 2 years ago. Beneath it, written in messy chicken scratch, were the words, "Daddy measured." Aaron stared at it for a long time. He remembered Mia's last birthday, when his daughter called him to ask if he was coming home to blow out the candles. He told her he was busy with a client. In reality, he was having dinner with Rachel and Brandon. He remembered Chloe's parent-teacher conference. I texted him 3 times, but he never showed up. That same day, he had taken Brandon to buy a toy truck. He remembered Sophie standing outside his home office holding a spelling bee trophy. She waited for over an hour, and when Aaron finally looked at her, he just said, "Put it on the desk." Perhaps for the first time, he realized he hadn't just betrayed a wife. He had completely thrown away the childhoods of his own children. On the morning of the 3rd day, Aaron called me. My phone buzzed while I was dropping the girls off at their new school in Seattle. I saw his name and declined the call. He sent a text, "I need to talk to the kids." I replied, "They are adapting. When they are ready, I will let you know." Aaron texted back, "I know I was wrong." I didn't answer. Regret that only comes after you realize you've been played isn't necessarily true repentance. It's often just the pain of no longer getting what you want. Ruth also started to change, but not in a good way. She paced back and forth in the living room, sometimes cursing Rachel as a scam artist, sometimes staring at the sleeping Brandon and wiping away tears. She said to Arthur, "Even though he isn't Aaron's, he's lived with us for a while. I don't have the heart to kick him out." Arthur replied, "Feeling pity for him is fine. But did you ever stop to think how your 4 biological granddaughters felt when you treated them the way you did?" Ruth turned her head away. "Why do you keep bringing that up? Because your exact way of thinking was what opened the door for an outsider to scam this entire family." Derek heard this and chimed in. "Dad, stop blaming Mom. Rachel is the one who ran the scam." Arthur glared at his youngest son. "And what about you?" Derek instantly replied, "I have nothing to do with it." On the 6th day, Brandon's aunt arrived to pick him up. The boy wrapped his arms around Aaron's neck and refused to get out of the car. "Daddy, come with me," Aaron gently pried the small fingers away one by one. "You go home with your aunt for now. Once we find your mom, the adults will talk." Brandon started bawling. "Daddy doesn't love me anymore." Aaron turned his face away, his voice hoarse. "This isn't your fault." The car drove away. Aaron stood in the driveway watching it until it disappeared. Just as he walked back inside, the head accountant called. Her voice was panicked. "Mr. Aaron, I just reconciled the data on the 3 new suppliers. We wired them nearly $2 million, but the inventory that arrived is worth a fraction of that. There is a gap of over $1.25 million with absolutely no inventory to show for it." Aaron gripped his phone. "Who approved the purchase orders?" Derek verified the invoices. Rachel cross-checked them, and you signed the payment authorizations. Derek was standing right behind him, speaking slowly. "Aaron, this might have something to do with Diana. She's the only one with the access and the data to make the company's books look this messy." The news of the missing $2 million spread through the company faster than any official memo. In just one morning, from the accounting department to the factory floor, everyone was whispering that someone had drained Oak Heritage Furniture and fled the state. My name was the most frequently mentioned. Derek was the one fanning the flames. In an emergency board meeting, he threw a stack of files onto the table. "Look at this. These are supplier evaluation forms approved by Diana last year. These shell companies were put on the vendor list based on her recommendation." Renee, the head accountant, opened the pages. "But the signatures on these 3 pages don't look like Diana's." Derek snapped back. "They don't look exactly alike because maybe she signed them in a hurry or used a digital stamp. She built the database. Altering the records is easy for her." Aaron sat silently, his eyes sunken. In front of him were wire authorizations bearing his own signature. Arthur asked, "You signed these without verifying the physical shipments?" Aaron clenched his fists. "Rachel and Derek already verified the goods arrived. I thought the procurement department had done its job." Derek said, "I just checked the paperwork. Diana built this procurement procedure from scratch. Right when the company gets caught losing money, she takes her 4 kids and runs off to Seattle. Is that just a coincidence? Arthur tapped his cane. Don't call it a coincidence until you have proof. You're still defending her. She owns 43% of the stock, controls the national accounts, and is currently in a legal dispute with Aaron. What if she intentionally tanked the company's value so she could seize total control? A production manager spoke up hesitantly. But the missing inventory falls under procurement and the warehouse. Diana's access to the payment portal was revoked months ago. Derek shot back. Exactly. That's why she set the trap way in advance. She planned her exit route a long time ago. Aaron stared at the stack of papers, then signed a formal request for a forensic audit of all transactions, emails, and my system access logs for the past 14 months. Arthur grabbed his son's wrist. By signing this, you are officially naming your ex-wife as a suspect. Aaron's voice was gravelly. I'm not accusing her. I'm just asking for a verification. Before you signed checks without verifying anything. Now you want to launch an investigation into the woman who built this company with you. Aaron didn't answer. The request was sent. The news immediately leaked. Several suppliers called to ask if the company was filing for bankruptcy. Clients delayed their down payments. In the employee group chat, a photo circulated showing the 5 of us at the airport, captioned, "Fled to the West Coast with stolen company funds after the divorce." No one knew who took the picture. In Seattle, I was figuring out the light rail route to the girls' school when an old client called. "Diana, the office in Michigan, says you embezzled funds and went on the run. Is that true?" I stopped in the middle of the station. I did not run. I am working here under contract and have all my documentation. The company finances are being audited and I am accused of tampering with supplier data. I will respond officially once the audit is complete. I hung up the phone. My hands were freezing despite my gloves. That afternoon, Riley came home from school looking pale. She placed her phone in front of me. In a group chat with her old friends from Michigan, someone had shared a link claiming her mother stole from her husband's family and ran away. A friend sent a private message. "What does your dad say? Did your mom really rob your whole family?" Riley's voice cracked. "Mom, I want to post the entire story of Dad's affair. Let them know who the real villain is." I handed her phone back. "No. But they're calling you a thief. Fighting on social media doesn't make the truth any clearer, so we stay quiet." I looked at my daughter. "I'm not staying quiet because I'm scared. I'm saving my words for the right time. People with actual evidence don't need to win screaming matches," Riley cried. "I hate them calling you a thief." I hugged her. "It hurts me too. But if you drag adult problems onto the internet to retaliate, you just pull yourself into the mud they created." My daughter wiped her tears, then opened her photo gallery. "Mom, remember when I said I saw Uncle Derek take Rachel to the doctor?" "Yes, honey." I took a picture of his car with Dad's old phone because I thought Uncle Derek parked illegally. I transferred the photo to my own phone later. In the photo, Derek was standing outside a maternity clinic, his hand supporting Rachel's lower back. The timestamp matched perfectly with Rachel's pregnancy. I asked, "Why didn't you tell me this earlier?" I forgot. I only remembered when I heard Uncle Derek denied having any relationship with Rachel. I sent the photo and the original metadata file to Miss Susan. Chloe, sitting next to me, suddenly ran to her room and grabbed a small notebook. "Mom, I also wrote down some invoice details back then." She opened it. 3 company names, phone numbers, email addresses, invoice dates, and exact transaction amounts were neatly recorded. "Where did you get these?" "I just copied what I saw when the accounting lady asked me to sort papers. I didn't hack into anyone's computer." I let out a sigh of relief. "You did the right thing by not digging any deeper. From now on, leave it to me and Miss Susan." Chloe looked at me. "Does Grandma believe Uncle Derek more than she believes you?" Before I could answer, my phone rang. Miss Susan said, "The photo doesn't conclusively prove Derek is the father, but it completely destroys his claim that they ended their relationship years ago. Chloe's list is the perfect starting point for tracing the funds. And the time-stamped server backups will prove who actually accessed the system." She paused, then added, "More importantly, Martha has a handwritten logbook. It records every truck that actually entered the warehouse and the days when no inventory arrived, but she was still forced to sign delivery receipts." I stood up. "Has Martha handed the book over yet?" "Not yet. She promised to meet my investigator this afternoon at a diner near the bus terminal. She said she felt like she was being followed, but was terrified they would destroy the evidence if she left it at the house." I immediately called Martha. The phone rang once, then went dead. By the agreed time, the investigator saw no sign of her. The diner owner confirmed Martha never showed up. Arthur sent people to check her quarters. The door to her small room behind the kitchen was wide open. Her clothes were there, but the tote bag she always carried was gone. Derek commented, "Martha is probably scared of being sued, so she ran away." I didn't believe it. Close to midnight in Michigan, Danny's phone received an automated ping from a location-sharing app he and his mother had set up. On the map, a single red dot remained stationary at an abandoned industrial park on the outskirts of Grand Rapids. A moment later, the signal died. The red dot only flashed for less than a minute, but it was enough for Danny to recognize the location. He called me, his voice shaking. "Diana, my mom would never go out there alone. That warehouse has been abandoned for a year. Uncle Derek used to rent it for storage." I told Danny absolutely not to go there alone. Derek had already framed him for stolen lumber once. If he acted recklessly, he would be the next one in danger. Danny's voice broke. "I'm scared if I wait too long, they'll hurt her." "Miss." Susan guided him to call the police, providing the last known location and the license plate of a suspicious truck caught on a neighbor's security camera. Only after she was rescued did Martha tell the full story. That afternoon, Derek had called her to the back gate, claiming Arthur wanted to meet her secretly, to ask about the warehouse logbook. Derek said, "My dad is at a friend's house. It's not safe to talk on the phone. Just bring the book. I'll drive you." Martha hid the book in a false bottom of her tote bag and got in the car. But instead of driving toward downtown, Derek drove to the outskirts. The car stopped in front of an old warehouse. As soon as the metal doors slammed shut, two strange men appeared. One snatched her phone and the other locked the door from the outside. On a plastic folding table sat a typed confession. It stated that out of sheer spite toward Derek, Martha had deliberately swapped the DNA samples and had conspired with me to create the fake supplier scandal to destroy the company. Martha read it, her face going pale. "You want me to confess to this?" Derek crossed his arms. "You just need to sign it. Once you do, I'll give your son a large sum of cash, clear his name from that lumber theft, and let you both leave Michigan for good. If you refuse, I will have Danny arrested for embezzlement. And as for you, a housekeeper who stole corporate data and ran away, who's going to believe you?" Martha looked him dead in the eye. "You know exactly how well Diana treated this family. Aren't you afraid of going to hell for this?" Derek sneered. "I am a blood son of this family, yet I had to watch my sister-in-law control the majority of the company. Do you think that's fair? She invested her own money and worked her fingers to the bone. It's only right she got shares. You want the reward without doing the work, that's what isn't fair." A brutal slap sent Martha crashing to the floor. Derek ordered the men to lock her up, giving her only water and a stale piece of bread. Before her phone was confiscated, Martha had managed to share her location with her son and deliberately dropped her hair clip outside the warehouse door. The police reviewed traffic cameras along the route. The pickup truck was spotted at a gas station, and a partial license plate was enough to identify it as a rental booked by one of Derek's associates. During the initial police sweep of the warehouse, the outer doors were locked, and a massive table saw was left running to drown out any screams. Martha had used a piece of wire to pry a gap in the siding and shoved a bloodied handkerchief through it. On the second sweep, the police found the handkerchief. After being held hostage for 36 hours, Martha was carried out of the warehouse severely dehydrated. The two hired thugs were arrested. Derek wasn't on site, but phone records and gas station footage linked him directly to the vehicle. I heard the news just as the sun was rising in Seattle. I sat on the stairs of my daughter's school, my legs trembling. Danny called from the hospital. "My mom is awake." The first thing she asked was if her book was still safe. The book was safe. Martha had hand-sewn an extra fabric lining into the bottom of her bag. The thugs who searched it only found the documents in the main compartment, completely missing the thin notebook hidden beneath. That very afternoon, Miss Susan and Arthur took the logbook to be cross-referenced with the corporate files. For every legitimate delivery, Martha had recorded the arrival time, the truck's plates, the driver's name, and the lumber quantity. On the days Derek forced her to sign fake receipts, she drew a tiny red dot. There were exactly 23 red dots. The head accountant pulled the corresponding payment authorizations. Millions of dollars had been paid out, but on the dates in the logbook, no trucks arrived, no lumber was unloaded, and there were no foreman signatures. The total value of the non-existent inventory was $1.25 million. The remaining $750,000 came from real shipments, but the invoices were heavily inflated by the phantom broker companies. Arthur looked at the numbers and asked Aaron, "You signed off on all of this?" Aaron's voice was raspy. Derek and Rachel verified it. "I assumed the wood was in the warehouse. You are the CEO, but you signed checks based on blind trust." Aaron looked down. "I was wrong." Inside the files, Arthur also found the 3 forged corporate resolutions with my fake signature, which aimed to dilute my shares, grant Aaron full asset control, and name Brandon as an heir. Derek was brought in for questioning by investigators. He tried to play it cool. "Dad, you can't just look at a housekeeper's notebook and assume things. Those resolutions could have been drafted by Diana." He then tried to point the finger back at me. "Miss." Susan placed a printer data log on the table. "Those 3 documents were printed from the machine in your private office. They were printed on days when Diana wasn't even in the building." Derek's face dropped. "Anyone could have used my computer?" Arthur asked. "And the men who locked Martha in a warehouse, I just hired guys to bring her in so we could talk. I didn't know they'd lock her up." Then why did they have a pre-typed confession ready for her to sign? Derek suddenly slammed his fists on the table. Because I had no other choice. This company belongs to our family. I am your son. Aaron is the eldest son. Why does an outsider woman hold more power than we do? Arthur stared at his youngest son. Because she saved this company from bankruptcy when neither of my sons could do a damn thing. Her money was real. Her sweat was real. Derek raised his voice. And eventually her 4 daughters are going to take all of that wealth into some other family. This company is not a pie that you get a slice of just because you were born a man. Right after finishing his sentence, Arthur clutched his chest and collapsed against his chair. Aaron rushed to support his father while Miss Susan called an ambulance. At the hospital after surviving a mild heart attack, Arthur asked to speak to Miss Susan privately. He handed over all the original corporate bylaws, the authentic stock certificates, and the shareholder ledgers he had guarded for years. After that, he video called me. My father-in-law looked incredibly frail. An IV line was taped to his hand. He said, "Diana, I used to think staying quiet was how I kept the family together. I realize now that my silence only empowered the people doing wrong. I couldn't say anything." He took a labored breath and continued, "Come home, not to save this family but to take back the justice that belongs to you, to your 4 daughters, and to the 184 people whose livelihoods depend on this company." 5 weeks after leaving the state, I stood at the arrivals gate at Detroit Metro Airport again. This time I did not have 4 daughters and 5 suitcases beside me. Riley, Chloe, Sophie, and Mia stayed in Seattle with Aunt Diane. Before I left, Mia hugged my neck and asked, "When you go back to Michigan, is Grandma going to yell at you again?" I stroked her hair. "I am going back to finish some business. No one is ever allowed to yell at me without a reason again." Riley pulled me aside. "Mom, don't let Dad apologize and win you back." I looked at my 15-year-old daughter. Her eyes carried the heavy exhaustion of adult problems. "I'm not going back to him." "Then what are you going back for?" "For the company. For my reputation. For my shares. And for the 184 people waiting for their paychecks." Riley nodded and handed me a thick scarf. "I know it's hot in Michigan right now, but take this. When you get tired, remember we are waiting for you." I put the scarf in my bag. It made no sense for the summer heat, but it made me feel like I had a true home to return to. As I walked out of the terminal, I saw Aaron. He was standing near the barricade. His shirt was wrinkled and his face was haggard. It had only been a month, but the hair at his temples had started turning gray. As soon as he saw me, he walked over quickly, trying to take my luggage cart. I stopped him. "I can handle it." He paused. "I thought you wouldn't come back." "I came because Miss Susan requested my presence." Aaron stared at me for a long time. "I didn't just come here because of the company." I stayed silent and kept walking toward the rideshare pickup. He followed behind. "Diana, I have done a lot of thinking. I am cutting all ties with Rachel. I don't care whose kid Brandon is anymore. If you agree, let's bring the girls home. We can start over." I stopped walking. That was the only time post-divorce that Aaron swallowed his ego and begged me to come back. Had he said this before that rainy night, before that Thanksgiving dinner, before he told me my 4 daughters weren't enough, I might have cried. But at that moment, my heart only felt an icy calm. "I didn't come back to be your wife." Aaron's face went pale. "I know you're still angry. Anger fades eventually. I came back because someone forged my signature, framed me for embezzlement, and pushed this company to the brink of collapse. I came back to protect my equity and the jobs of 184 employees. I want to save the company too. Then start by telling the whole truth." I ordered a car. Aaron opened the door for me, but I chose to get in the other side. He stood in the middle of the parking lot watching me drive away. That afternoon, I met Miss Susan at her office. On the table was the paperwork Martha had kept from the DNA swab incident. Miss Susan said, "The lab still had the original genetic markers on file. We officially cross-referenced them. The sample submitted under Brandon's name last year is a 100% match to Mia's DNA." I looked at the conclusive line. My hands turned to ice. I already knew my daughter had been used, but seeing the truth printed on official letterhead felt like a violent violation of a child's most private boundaries. "Does Mia need to be swabbed again?" "Yes, but only for an independent verification. The process will be done with your consent fully witnessed and her data heavily protected." The results confirmed the old sample belonged to Mia. The DNA test Aaron had used to proudly announce his heir to the world was actually just proof of his biological connection to his youngest daughter. 3 days later, the official court-ordered DNA test between Derek and Brandon came back. The probability of paternity was 99.9%. Arthur read it and closed his eyes. Ruth gripped the edge of the table, her lips trembling. "So Brandon is Derek's." Derek still tried to deny it. "I don't accept this test." "When was the sample taken? Who witnessed it?" Miss Susan slid the chain of custody report across the table. "The sample was taken according to court procedure with verified ID and a sworn officer present. You signed right here." Derek looked at his signature and had absolutely nothing left to say. Aaron stood in front of his brother. How long did you know? Derek smiled bitterly. Why do you care? You gotta play daddy for a year. Didn't you love it? Aaron lunged at him, but Arthur screamed, Stop. This house has suffered enough humiliation. Don't add a fistfight to the list. Aaron stopped, his fists trembling. That afternoon, Rachel was found hiding at a relative's house near the coast. She hadn't fled the state. She just turned off her phone and laid low. During interrogation, Rachel immediately flipped. She handed over all the texts, wire transfers, and audio files Derek had sent her. It included the list of shell companies, the kickback structure, and instructions on how to use Brandon to manipulate Ruth into forcing Aaron to hire Rachel. At the law office, Rachel said to me, I know you don't believe me, Diana, but at first I really just wanted security for my son. I stared at her. You stole my daughter's DNA, stole my children's rightful place, and helped drain my company's bank accounts. You call that looking for security? Rachel looked down. I was wrong. But Derek planned the whole thing. He said if I didn't help, he would abandon us completely. But you still chose to do it. Rachel cried, but I felt absolutely no pity. Tears don't erase an adult's accountability. After a moment of silence, Rachel said, There is one thing you need to know. Aaron's hands aren't entirely clean. Aaron, who was standing in the hallway, burst into the room. Rachel, shut your mouth. The woman turned to him. You knew some of the invoices were inflated. You told us, let it slide so the company's profit margins look lower. That way, when Diana demands her half in the divorce, her payout will be smaller. The room went dead silent. I looked at Aaron. He shook his head frantically. I just thought they were marking up the prices a normal amount. I didn't know they were completely faking shipments. Rachel opened a chat history on her phone. You literally texted Derek and me, make sure Diana doesn't see the real profit and loss sheets until the divorce is finalized. I asked, How much did you really know, Aaron? He slumped against the wall, his shoulders caving in. I knew they were inflating the costs. I thought it was just a way to cook the books a little. Yes, I wanted the company's valuation to look lower during the divorce. But I had no idea Derek was stealing millions, let alone kidnapping Martha. He didn't know about the worst parts of the crime, but he knew exactly what he was doing to defraud me. Aaron couldn't meet my eyes. For the past few weeks, he had played the victim, a father betrayed by fake bloodlines, a CEO scammed by his own brother. Only in that moment did he finally realize that his own greed, betrayal, and malicious intent to rob his wife were exactly what left the door wide open for this catastrophe. The emergency shareholder meeting was held at 9:00 a.m. on Monday in the main conference room of Oak Heritage Furniture. Arthur sat at the head of the table. He hadn't fully recovered. A pill organizer and a glass of water sat next to him. I sat on the left side with Miss Susan. Aaron sat across from me. He looked exhausted. Derek sat next to him, but the brothers refused to look at each other. Ruth had asked permission to attend as a family member. I agreed, but made one thing clear. Today is a corporate board meeting. Anyone who tries to use family emotions to excuse criminal behavior will be escorted out. Miss Susan checked the attendance ledger. The corporation has 3 legal shareholders, Diana holding 43%, Arthur holding 24%, and Aaron holding 33%. We have a 100% quorum. She placed the original corporate registry and operating agreement on the table. The 3 resolutions used to dilute Diana's equity are officially declared fraudulent. The signatures were forged, no board meeting was called, and they lack unanimous shareholder ratification. Aaron looked at me. He admitted to seeing one of the drafts. Derek told me he was just preparing the paperwork and that we would only sign it if you agreed. I asked, You saw my name and a forged signature on it, but you just left it in the file, he answered quietly. I didn't think it was legally binding yet. Miss, Susan stated, knowing a forged legal document exists and allowing it to be used is a severe liability. Whether you actively participated in the forgery or not, the authorities will decide. Derek slammed his hand on the table. Stop acting like this is all my fault. Aaron is the CEO. His signature is on the wire transfers. Why am I the only one taking the heat? The head accountant was called into the room. Renee placed the forensic report in front of everyone. Over 14 months, 3 affiliated shell companies received a total of $2 million. $750,000 of that was for real goods but heavily marked up. $1.25 million was wired for inventory that never existed. Derek demanded, What's your proof that the goods didn't arrive? The doors opened. Martha walked in alongside Danny. The bruising on her face had faded. She placed a thin notebook on the table. I logged the arrival time, license plates, and driver names for every truck. There are 23 days where delivery receipts were signed, but not a single truck ever pulled into the loading dock. Derek glared at her. You're a housekeeper. Who gave you authorization to go into the warehouse and log inventory? Martha shot back. I manage the household deliveries and review the security gate logs every night. I might not have a college degree, but my eyes work perfectly fine when it comes to seeing if a semi-truck actually pulled into the driveway. Danny added a stack of freight logs. Every real shipment has GPS data. The deliveries, mister? Derek forced me to sign off on retroactively. The warehouse addresses didn't even exist. Derek looked at Aaron. See, they conspired to frame me. Aaron didn't defend his brother anymore. He just asked, where did the money go? Renee pulled up a flowchart. A portion went into accounts linked to Rachel's relatives. The rest was funneled into LLCs owned by Derek's associates, then withdrawn in cash or used to pay off private debts. Rachel was brought in last. She wore a plain dark shirt and no makeup. Before questioning her, Miss Susan placed the official DNA results on the table, legally establishing Derek as Brandon's father. No one could deny it anymore. Miss Susan asked, do you confirm that these text messages and kickback ledgers were provided by you? Rachel answered, yes. Did you participate in verifying phantom suppliers and covering up the lack of physical inventory? She paused for a few seconds, then said yes. I followed Derek's plan, but I knew it was illegal. Derek stood up. You sold me out to save yourself. Rachel looked right at him. You used your own flesh and blood as bait to steal money. And when it all fell apart, you tried to pin it all on me. I have zero reason to protect you. Ruth covered her mouth, sobbing. Derek, did you do all of this just because your father didn't give you shares? Derek turned to her. You're seriously asking that Aaron was handed the crown? When Diana showed up, the majority of the company fell into the hands of an outsider. Meanwhile, I busted my ass for years and remained just a salaried employee. I said, you were given authority over procurement, a salary, and bonuses. But you wanted what didn't belong to you, so you chose to steal it. Derek pointed at me. You took your 4 daughters and left. This company was going to end up in the hands of outsiders anyway. Arthur leaned heavily on the table and forced himself to stand up. Diana's daughters carry the blood of this family. But even if they didn't, her shares are hers. This company is not the exclusive birthright of the men in this family. The room went dead silent. Arthur looked at Aaron. And you? Did you sign those wire transfers because you blindly trusted your brother, or because you wanted to tank the company's value during your divorce? Aaron squeezed his eyes shut. Both. I knew the prices were inflated. I thought they were just skimming off the top to hide profits. I didn't know Derek was draining millions. If he had stolen a little less, would you have considered it acceptable? I asked. Aaron looked down. No. Miss Susan read the proposed resolutions. Immediately suspend Aaron as CEO, permanently terminate Derek's employment and authority, appoint an external interim CEO, and hand all evidence of fraud over to federal investigators. Arthur cast his vote in favor. I did the same. 67% was enough to pass the motion. Aaron stared at the paper in front of him for a very long time, then stood up. He walked around the table, slumped heavily into the empty chair next to me, and buried his face in his hands. Diana, I am not asking you to come back to me. I am only asking you. Don't let this company die. Please save what we built together. I stood perfectly still. I am saving this company for the 184 employees and for my equity. And because your father finally had the courage to fix his mistakes, I am not saving it for you. Aaron looked down, his shoulders shaking. I continued. Sit up straight. Pleading with me now doesn't make up for 16 years of forcing me and my daughters to bow our heads. He slowly stood up. There was nothing left to say. The board resolutions were signed that morning. The corporate seal banking tokens and operational files were handed over to the interim CEO. All evidence of the embezzlement, the forged documents, Martha's kidnapping, and the DNA fraud was sealed and handed to the authorities. As everyone filed out of the room, I looked back at the CEO's chair where Aaron used to sit. It was still there, perfectly neat and completely empty. For the first time, I understood that a person doesn't lose their power when someone else takes their chair. They lose it the moment their own choices make them unworthy to sit in it. Almost a year after that board meeting, the fallout at Oak Heritage Furniture finally reached its legal conclusion. The shell accounts, fake contracts, and burner phones definitively linked Derek to the stolen corporate funds. Hiring thugs to lock Martha in a warehouse could no longer be spun as inviting her for a talk. Rachel cooperated and provided evidence, but that didn't absolve her from verifying phantom shipments and tampering with a child's DNA test. She still faced federal charges for wire fraud. A portion of the stolen funds was recovered. The luxury cars Derek bought were seized, and 2 properties registered under his friends' names were frozen. The rest became a court-ordered restitution debt. Danny's name was officially cleared, and the company issued a public apology to him. Martha received a substantial settlement. I proposed that the company hire her to manage the corporate cafeteria with a lucrative contract. She shook her head. Diana, you don't have to be this good to me. I held her hands. This isn't charity. This is exactly what you earned. Martha cried, but this time her tears felt light. Aaron wasn't indicted as the mastermind, but he was held civilly liable for the wire transfers he authorized, the inflated costs, and his deliberate attempt to hide assets during the divorce. He lost his CEO title, all management rights, and his future shareholder dividends were garnished to repay the corporate losses. His $5,000 monthly child support obligation remained strictly enforced. Aaron now works as a mid-level manager at a much smaller company. His salary is average. His luxury SUV was sold off. Once he called me, "I finally understand now. When you injected that $275,000 into the shop back then, how massive of a risk you took," I replied. "Realizing it too late is better than never realizing it at all, but understanding it now doesn't rewrite history." He asked, "Are the girls healthy?" "They are. If they ever want to talk to you, I won't stop them." Riley was the first to agree to a phone call with her father. Aaron apologized for everything. Riley said, "I won't stop you from being our dad, but don't think one apology magically erases everything. If you want us to trust you again, you're going to have to prove it for a very long time." After she hung up, my daughter asked, "Mom, was I too harsh?" I hugged her shoulders. "No, honey. Forgiving someone doesn't mean destroying your boundaries. You are just protecting your own trust." Ruth was the slowest to change. After Derek was indicted, she almost never left the house. The relatives who had flocked to the welcome party slowly distanced themselves. The 2-4-carat gold signet ring remained locked in its box, and she never dared to speak the word sole heir again. Once she video called her granddaughters. None of the girls were rude, but none of them eagerly chattered away like they used to. Ruth started crying. "Are you girls still mad at Grandma?" I didn't answer for them. Riley spoke up. "Grandma, we don't hate you, but we remember what you did. Please just give us time." Her grandmother looked down. "Grandma is sorry." Those 2 words arrived years too late, but at least they were finally spoken. Arthur's health declined after his hospitalization. He no longer went to the factory every day, though he still read the weekly reports. Before I flew back to Seattle, he invited me over for dinner. On the table was just roasted chicken, green beans, and mashed potatoes, simple, exactly like the days before the company made millions. He poured us both a cup of black coffee and said, "I'm sorry, Diana. I always thought playing the peacemaker was the fair thing to do. I realize now that when one side is being abused, staying neutral just means taking the side of the abuser." My throat tightened. "I never blamed you for not loving me. I was just sad because you loved me, but you never had the courage to protect me." Arthur nodded. "I understand." Had he understood that sooner, I might not have refused to accept any additional assets from him. My 43% stake remained intact. Once the company stabilized under the new CEO, I sold a portion of my shares to a domestic private equity firm, keeping just enough to protect my voting rights, and established a profit-sharing trust for the employees. I made sure every transaction was entirely transparent. I wanted to ensure that when I left this time, there were 0 loopholes left for anyone to exploit. Brandon is now being raised by his aunt in another state close to Rachel's mother. His name and photos are kept strictly private. The boy was innocent. It was the adults who turned his existence into a weapon. Aaron occasionally sends him birthday gifts but no longer forces the boy to call him dad. Derek is legally required to pay child support from whatever wages he earns in the future. Even though the law can mandate payments, it can never mandate a father's love. The day I flew back to Seattle, I didn't carry much luggage. In my bag were just finalized legal documents, a few souvenirs, and the scarf Riley gave me. My 4 daughters were waiting for me at King Street Station with Aunt Diane. Mia ran up and hugged my legs. "Mommy really came back." I kneeled down. "I promised I would, didn't I?" That night, the 5 of us baked homemade apple pies together. Chloe's crust was perfectly crimped. Sophie stuffed hers with way too many apples and it burst in the oven. Riley laughed, calling it a stress relief pie. The small kitchen was filled with laughter. Mia sat on a tall stool peeling apples and asked, "Mom, does Grandma finally know that girls are part of the family too?" I looked at my daughters and answered slowly, "I think Grandma is learning. Some people learn their lessons quickly. Others have to pay a very heavy price before they finally understand. But you girls never have to wait for someone else to understand your worth before you are allowed to be happy." Outside the window, a light snow was falling. Inside our small apartment, the sweet smell of baking cinnamon mixed with the laughter of my 4 girls. I used to think happiness meant keeping a family together at all costs. In the end, I finally realized that the only family worth keeping is one where no one ever has to bow their head just to be loved. Boy or girl, they are all your flesh and blood. A company can be lost and rebuilt, but a child's dignity and innocence once trampled leaves scars that take a lifetime to heal.